I'm Robert Williams from MetalRules.com, and joining me tonight in San Antonio, Texas for this year's Rockstar Energy Drink Mayhem Festival is Mr. Paul Bostaph, drummer of Slayer. How you doing tonight, Paul?
Good, how are you?
Doing great, thanks.
Right on.
So Slayer's upcoming album, Repentless, is currently going to be released on September 11th through Nuclear Blast Records. I know that you and Kerry King put a lot of tireless effort into creating this new album. Tell us about returning to Slayer and what you name as your personal favorite tracks on Repentless.
Well, I mean, coming back to Slayer was, something I never thought would happen, obviously they were already kind of back together, not back together, but moving on. They already had a solid unit going. So, I moved on with my life and everything else, but when I got a phone call, it was like, without a doubt in my mind, I was like, yes, I'd love to come back. So I was super excited about that. And, Kerry and I worked hard on this record, but Kerry worked harder than anybody. So, we just got in the room and grinded it out. And that's one thing I love about working with Kerry because, he's got a tremendous work ethic. And, that type of drive is something I thrive on. So, that really kind of like, every time I worked on Kerry, the last record we did, God Hates Us All, like Kerry and I would get off the road, and 4 days later, we would be, working on the new album. So most of the time, people get off the road and they take a couple weeks off at least.
Yeah.
But it was just, it's that kind of, for lack of a better word, blue collar work ethic that just kind of I really love. So that kind of energy, got us, brought us into the studio. We brought that into the studio with us as well. And I don't know, my favorite tracks on the record. There's a lot of good tracks on that record. I love Chasing Death, Piano Wire, Vices, Cast the First Stone. It keeps going, and also I think it depends on any given day I listen to it. One day or another, like after listening to it, another song will pop into my head. And man, I really like that song today. So then that's a good sign. I enjoy it. I personally enjoy the record, but that's.
Kerry's been calling it your Rain in Blood.
I think he said that about God Hates Us All too. So hopefully he keeps saying that about every record I do. But it's a compliment. Obviously I try to work my ass off on every record I do, and I think that anybody who's a drummer for a band does.
Yeah.
That's a big compliment coming from Kerry.
And God Hates Us All was also released on September 11th, right?
It was, yes.
Was that like a coincidence, or did you guys intentionally do that? Or
you mean when we released God Hates Us All, or when
the new one, Repentless?
Repentless.
That's just how
as far as I know, that's just the way the dice rolled.
Wow, crazy.
Yeah.
So what did you find most challenging about working on the new album? I know you guys spent 2 years on it?
Kerry and I spent 2 years working on the record. Most of the time because we thought that we were going to be going in the studio, and then we weren't going in the studio, and we kind of kept ourselves at the ready because we didn't know, at what moment we were going to be called on to go in and record. So, we just kept pounding it out.
And you had that previous chemistry with Gary Holt, having played in Exodus. Well, what's it like jamming with Gary again in Slayer?
It's great jamming with Gary. It was great when I jammed with him in Exodus too. I've known Gary over the years from being, involved in the San Francisco thrash metal scene. But it was, and I say this every time, but it's just because it makes sense. Is that, when I rejoined this band, it wasn't like Kerry and and Tom, and then some guy I didn't know, because obviously we don't have Jeff with us anymore. So it was when we got together, it was like we were already a band.
Yeah.
I know Kerry and Tom throughout the years, and I know Gary as well. So the chemistry was already there.
And Gary only really did guitar solos on Repentless, right?
Yeah.
So, what do you expect him to bring to the table if he gets a chance to do some songwriting for the follow-up?
What? Sorry. Say again?
What do you anticipate Gary bringing to the table in Slayer if he gets to do some songwriting stuff on the follow-up to Repentless?
Oh, come on. It's Gary Holt.
Uh-huh.
Look, if Gary contributes, it's going to be nothing but crushing and heavy. So, it's Kerry's doing a fantastic job. This band's always had two guitar players that have written. So, I mean, I hope if Gary gets involved in it, him and Carrie work together on some stuff. Um, could really make for some really crushingly heavy music.
Probably a different dynamic too, right? He's got a real brutal style.
Oh, I mean, without a doubt. I mean, anytime you take away a player or add a player in an ensemble situation, you're adding a new dynamic. You're taking a dimension away, you're adding a new dimension. It depends on the strengths and the weaknesses of the individual you're, taking in and putting out. But I mean, with Gary, Gary was there in the beginning with thrash metal. He was one of the Exodus was one of the bands that started it. So that being said, Metallica, Slayer, Anthrax, Exodus, Megadeth, those guys are on the forefront of who started it. Gary's right there, so he without a doubt, if he writes anything for the next record at all, it's going to be something that it's going to be killer because he gets it.
Most definitely. So I read online that you guys had saved 6 songs from the Repentless sessions for a follow-up. Is that correct?
I'd say it's roughly about that. Man, at the end of it, we started, typically, every time I've recorded with Slayer, we've usually recorded only 13 songs. But this time it was we had the main body of the record recorded. We went back in for a second session to re-record some other stuff we hadn't recorded. And then there was other songs Carrie would bring in, or, and other stuff we tried that, it was really pretty much the first session I ever had where I'd have the recording drum set all set up, mic'd up, ready to go, and I had a rehearsal drum set set up right next to it. So Carrie'd bring some songs in, we'd play them through about 10 times, and, we'd record it. So some of those tracks made it to the record, some of them didn't, and I'm sure some of them are really strong, and once we kind of tighten them up a little more, you'll probably hear them again in the future.
Very cool. And how far down the pipeline do you envision that being? Like another 7 years, or?
Man, it's
tough to say.
If it's 7 years, that means this record's done really well.
Yeah.
But I couldn't tell you that. That's something nobody can answer. In other words, you just never know what your touring cycle is going to bring. But I'd like to start working on new material as soon as possible.
So having been in Forbidden, Testament, Slayer, Exodus, are there any up and coming thrash bands right now that send you into orbit as a drummer, or anything you can't get enough of right now in the thrash scene?
At the moment, no. Because I've been so just inundated with Slayer. I haven't really had the opportunity or afforded myself the opportunity to go out and listen to anything that's brand new yet.
So, Kerry King stated in a recent interview that one of Jeff Hanneman's last decisions in Slayer was to get you back in the band. What are some of your favorite memories of your time performing with Jeff and Slayer?
There's so many of them. Probably, probably one of my there's so many, like I said, there's so many of them. But one that comes to mind is the first time I played 8 shows with them. The first 8 shows I ever played. It was only an 8-show run. We did 4 shows in the United States. And this was all, my trial by fire. It's either it works or it doesn't work. But, we did 4 shows in Europe, the last of which was the Castle Donington Festival in 92. I think it was 92.
Wow.
And, I remember before that show, it was super cold. And I remember... all I had was I used to wear long sleeve shirts when it was cold outside. I put this long sleeve shirt on. I had just gotten off tour with Testament. I filled in for them, and so it was a Testament shirt. I'm like, well, it's black. Okay, I'm gonna wear it and whatever. And I remember Jeff walks up to me and he's like, "Uber alles, motherfucker," and I'm like, "Uber alles? Like what?" I'm like, "What do you mean?"
Overall?
Yeah, and Carrie's like, "Yeah, Uber alles, motherfucker," and I'm like, what are you guys talking about? And I'm like, and finally, Jeff's like, you don't know? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, Slayer above all. You don't wear, It was just at the time, it was just since I was new, it was part of my hazing. But I remember, I'm like, okay, I'm also, you mean that I can't wear this shirt? Like, no. I'm like, well, what if I turn it inside out? They were like, oh, okay. So I turned the shirt inside out and I wore it during the show, which was great. I thought it was great because it was just, it was more it wasn't done in a mean way. It was just, it was something that I always remember.
Yeah.
You know, and also the other thing I'll remember before that show, I'll never forget. Like typically, like when we get ready for a show, it's business. But back then, and what I mean by business, it's like it's game on. Get the intensity going. Everything like that. But before that show, we were waiting for such a long time. I remember, I think it was Kerry. He was warming up on his guitar, and there's a circular table in the middle of the dressing room. Well, Kerry starts walking around the table, playing his guitar. Well, the next thing you know, Jeff gets behind him, and he starts doing it. So they're walking around this table, and then Tom gets behind him. All three of them are walking around this table, warming up their guitars, laughing. And it was great because it was, it was one of those things where it was, it was loose and it was cool.
Yeah.
But that was kind of those are things that I think that I always remember about Jeff. Some of them.
So you said that was 92. Had you ever done anything of that magnitude, like perform at Donington before that experience?
Never anything like that.
Wow.
The biggest festival I think I ever played prior to that was the Dynamo Festival in Holland, and that was in 1990, I think it was. Maybe 89.
Was that rough, like going on stage and just seeing like an ocean of metalheads just going crazy?
No, it wasn't because I already knew the magnitude of the situation.
Yeah.
I kept I made it simple for myself. Instead of making it this big gigantic festival that means so much, I just told myself, look, all this is are drums, amplifiers, and vocals. That's all this is.
Uh-huh.
So it doesn't matter if there's 3 people here or 50,000, which was 50,000 at that time.
Holy shit.
And so it did that to me. I was like, now was I nervous? Yeah, but I just managed to rationalize it and put it into perspective where I was able to focus on it for what it really was.
Yeah.
It's just a rock show, So a Slayer show, but that was it was an incredible experience.
Well, thanks so much for sharing that. I know you're a super busy guy, Paul. I'll let you get back to it. Any last words for your fans watching at home before we wrap this up?
Yeah, thanks for the support.
Awesome.